Hey, my name is ShawNshawN. I sell art on ShawNshawN.co and special on eBay. Today we're going to review, what are we reviewing? Scary stories to tell in the dark. So this original screenplay was by Guillermo del Toro, and then he kind of handed off the project to director Andre Ovedral. Time's about 1 hour 51 minutes, a little long, but kind of about right for a horror film, especially shot in 1968. The film of those times are slower. And I didn't feel like there was any dead periods as far as the film. The film stars Zoe Margaret Coletti as Stella Nicholas. She's kind of the pimply teenager girl. Michael Garza as Ramon Morales, so kind of this mysterious Mexican teen that traveled through the town and end up in their town. Gabriel Rush is Augie Hillebrandt, one of the friends of Zoe, and Austin Zagur is Chuck Steinberg. So you have these four teenagers. They're kind of, it's Halloween night, and they're planning the revenge against a school bully who has kind of, dogged them at school and embarrassed them at school. And now they're like, well, we're going to get back at this kid. So they're collecting shit into a bag and put it into a bag that looks like a bag of candy, right? And so they're walking down the street in their costumes, and this guy goes out, steals their candy, right? Throws it in the car, and you're like, oh, what's that smell? And there's literally shit in his car. So he crashes his car, right? All distracted. And obviously he's super pissed about it. And so he starts chasing them, and they're chasing the car, and these guys are running all over the place. And they run to a drive-in theater, which is next door, and they start hiding out between the cars. And this guy's hunting them car by car by car, and they're like, oh, let's jump in this car. There's this kid. They jump and say, hey, can you let us hide in here? First he's like all excited, like, oh, a girl jumped in. Hey, this is not bad. And then it's like his two friends like, oh shit, what the hell is this crap? And then the bully shows up, and he's like, oh man, you're gonna get it. Come out of here. Come on, step out. Be a man. And then the cinema guard shows up and is like, come on, you got to get out of here. Get back in your car. So he's like, yeah, you're gonna get it. And they're like, whatever. So then their friends are like, these newfound friends are like, hey, you want to go see a haunted house? We'll go see the local haunted house. Like, all right, sure, let's go check it out. So they drive to the haunted house. They show up there. They have to go through all these barriers, right? So the fence is locked. They find a hole in the fence. The door is locked. Front door. They pick that. They get inside. One kid goes upstairs and he gets locked in this room. And then he opens the door and he's like, he's looking out of the room, and everything is shot kind of in this blue-green kind of horror film color grading, but he looks in the room and it's just a normal, boom, at present day, like normal lighting, and he's like, what the hell is this? And so they see this old lady in a bed, and she has like the over and pincher, and he's like, oh my god, they're gonna fucking kill me. Like, what the hell's going on, right? And then he closes the door and he's like paranoid, and then his friends open the door and he's back in the 1968 present day. So he already knows there's something off about this house, like, let's get the hell out of this house, it's spooky as hell. In the meantime, the other friends have gone into the kitchen or something, and then they find this secret button on the wall, and the cupboard just goes aside, and they find this lock. They open the lock, it opens this door, and they go out into the basement. So in the basement they're finding these secret rooms, and there's these stories in town of this girl Sarah Bellows, the secret daughter of the Bellows, and the Bellows were kind of the paper mill family, the founding father family of the town. So they were really rich at some point, had this huge mansion, and now it's abandoned, and you're like, why the hell is this abandoned? It's obviously a really nice house, but then they keep their daughter locked away in the basement. No one in town knows, is she mentally deranged? Is she retarded? No one knows why she's in the basement. And so these kids are finding these rooms, and they're unlocking, picking the locks, and they finally get to the final room, open that lock. They're stumbling around, looking around. They find this weird wind-up toy, and it goes, and it has the initials of the girl, SB. And at the same time, so they turn that on, but at the same time, they open a book. And when they open the book, they find, there's several books, and they pick one book and they find, oh, this is the book of Sarah, right? And they're like, oh my god, this is the story she wrote to the kids, right? Because supposedly these kids, while she was alive, she would tell stories to the kids, and then the kids would just mysteriously disappear. No one knew why, what happened, right? So they open the book, and they're like, they have some terrible stories in it. And the girl, Stella, she's actually a budding writer herself. She's just kind of flipping through, and she's like, oh, these are really good stories. What is this? And she starts reading, and then all of a sudden she's like, whoa, this. They take the book out. She gets home, she's flipping through reading it, and then all of a sudden she sees like one story, and she's like, I don't think this was in here before, right? And then she touches the ink, and the ink's fresh. She's like, how could the ink be fresh? And she's reading the story, and she's like, something of a scarecrow. She's like, what the hell is this? And so at the same time, the school bully is out in the cornfield. So he's on a farm, all these kids are on a farm, and my mic's not even facing the right way. It's been a mess recording this video. So the kid's out in the cornfields. He always goes by and he beats up this scarecrow, and it's kind of like this pumpkin scarecrow head, and half its body's missing, but it's a scarecrow, right? To scare all the birds, like there's a man in the field. And he always takes a stick and just beats him. Hey, Chuck, I hate you, or whatever. And he goes by and he's like, hey, there's no scarecrow. What the hell happened, right? And then he goes on another row, and the scarecrow's there, and he's like, what the fuck? And so he turns around the other direction. He's like, holy shit, there's a scarecrow there. And he keeps running. And he almost makes it out of the cornfield, right? And he falls down, of course. He gets up and he's trying to fight the scarecrow, and the scarecrow just pitchforks it right through him, right? And as he pitchforks him, then all straw starts growing out of his body, right? And then slowly this kid turns into the straw man. So that's kind of the first death. You know, the kids start to figure out like, oh my God, we unlocked this book. And the book keeps writing its own stories. And they're like, oh my God, why is it writing stories? And then it's killing the friends off one by one, right? And so it has this story developing as they're trying to figure out how to stop the book. They try to burn the book. They rip out pages out of the book. And nothing stops the book from writing itself, so they don't really know what to do. And so they start investigating the whole backstory of Sarah Bellows, this girl, and they start uncovering a lot of family secrets of why she was locked away. Was the family twisted? Was the family right to do that? What is the family covering up? So these kind of things. And they have a really nice development of old tech in here. So they don't just use like records. They're uncovering all these clues, and then the family is set when they're trapped in like the 30s, right? So they pull out and they call these old documents, and they're like, oh my God, these people are crazy, right? And they pull out and they have a wax cylinder. So a wax cylinder was the technology before LPs. They have this wax and it would cut into the wax, and then you put a special recorder and it would play, and it was basically your first phonograph, right, before LPs. And so they start playing the wax cylinder, and then the wax cylinder starts spinning another story like, oh my God, you're gonna kill someone else, right? So it's pretty funny, like all the different elements here. I really like the sets. They're set in 68. It makes sense why it's set in 68, in the sense that in the background they have a couple of themes that are playing that kind of give a lot of dimension to the film. So one is in the background they have President Nixon is running as a candidate for election. So you have the choice between the three different candidates. You know, what do you want to do? How do you guys feel about Vietnam? And so you have this choice between, you know, the worst. This guy gets elected. At the time, he seemed like the good candidate, and then later it turns out to be a crook, right? Nixon, you know, with all this foul play that Nixon got into. So kind of subtly telling, you know, referencing kids like, hey, if you don't vote in elections, stuff like this happens, like with, you know, say for example Trump getting elected, right? So it's kind of interesting because they're talking to the youth at their level, but in a secret, you know, shadowy way, just in the background. Another theme they have in this is this Mexican kid that comes visits a town. You know, the cop stops him. He's like, hey, what are you doing in town, guy? And this is typical in small towns. They would ask anyone to stop in town, like, who are you? What are you doing? Because they know everyone, right? You know, my brother knows. He basically knows almost everyone in town. It's crazy. I mean, he must know 10,000 people. I don't know, but like he literally goes to every gas station. Hey, how's it going? What are you doing? Da, 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 da. And so if you meet someone new, you'd be like, who's this guy? You know, they immediately spot strangers to the town. So the cop's like, hey, who are you? And this guy makes up this backstory. Hey, I'm Ramon, and he's falsifying his name, which, you know, he turned out later he has a different name. And it's interesting because his real last name is Morales, which is, you know, if you know Spanish, that's just morals, right? So morals in English. So, you know, it's kind of like he's playing a trick, but then in the end his name becomes Morales, so he becomes a moral person, right? He goes from the bad to the good, but the good guy has to go to Vietnam. So you're like, what's so good about going to Vietnam, dude? You might come back in a body bag, right? And it turns out his brother had won. His brother came back and, you know, obviously dead in pieces, and so it was just like he didn't want to go, right? And so I have this really great story, backstory for Ramon, which I think, you know, Guillermo del Toro is kind of just talking about his own past in a way, or a possible past for him in the past as he grew up as a teenager, about, you know, if you do avoid the draft, how do you do it? Do you go to fight for your country? Is it a moral war? You know, at the time they thought it was a moral war. They didn't know the Battle of Tonkin was staged at this point, and, you know, China had stopped the commies in North Korea. You know, North Korea had basically been a puppet of China, and they set them up and then said, oh, take over South Korea. So, you know, originally Korea was all united, and then, you know, you had this puppet state, but then the South Koreans were kind of incompetent, so they had the Americans, but we kind of beat them up 50-50, so they thought this would happen in Vietnam. They'd stop communism from spreading into Vietnam because it had already taken the whole Eastern Bloc from Russia. It had taken Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Czech Republic, Slavic, East Germany. So there was this huge chunk of Europe that had gone from capitalism to communism overnight. And so at that point, there's this real communist threat. So Vietnam is seen in that aspect. I don't think they really talk about it in the film, so you kind of have to know that backstory for it to make sense. But yeah, I like the backstory of Ramon. It, you know, really kind of adds a lot of color to the film. And as well, like the town bully kind of harasses him, and he kind of gets revenge by spray painting his car with wetback. And so all these kids had to kind of deal with, you know, racism. It's also an interesting thing of, you know, you have the president playing in the background, this bad guy versus good guy, or, you know, the lesser of the three bad guys, basically, right? In the recent election, you have Donald Trump got elected, obviously, so it's kind of a reference point to today's world. You have like a guy who's like a crook, who Nixon turned out to be a crook, and all this crazy stuff in the White House, and then you have a new guy. So it's this subtle connection line between the two presidencies, and a subtle commentary, I would say, on the today's president without being obvious about it, which is actually the best way to do it. So that element of the story is really interesting because it just slightly touched on, it just adds a little bit of flavor to the film, give it that appropriateness to why they shot in 68. The other really cool thing, besides the color grading where it's like green blue horror film, and then real lighting is like either shot a normal part of the day, they're outside the haunted house, or they're in the haunted house, and then you're like, holy shit, but it's in the 30s, you're like, oh shit, what the hell's going on? So they have nice color grading, which, you know, horror film, you need really good color grading. I think that's basically it. Anyway, hope you guys like my theme. I would recommend it. Oh, another thing I was going to talk about as horror films in general, you know, I think it's one of the last genres that really makes sense to see in the cinema versus on your big screen TV. You get a little bit more in the cinema because you have these really quiet times in the film, and then it really boom, you know, so that's very dramatized in a cinema if you got a really good sound system and a really good movie. So it really makes sense to see in the cinema. I mean, like I saw Alien on this little black and white screen when I was 14 on TV, right? And it was just grainy, but it was scary as hell, dude. And my mom saw the original in the cinema, and she literally had nightmares for 3 weeks. Now, I don't know if I would have nightmares for 3 weeks, but that's a potent film, dude. You have nightmares for 3 weeks, right? And if you guys don't know, they're re-releasing Alien, so you should definitely go see that. The special effects are going to be super hokey in it, but the freaking suspense and build-up in that film is so fucking hardcore good. Really scary film, really good build-up. You know, it's kind of like, you know, the special effects are a little kludgy nowadays. It looks pretty bad. I've seen parts of it recently, and I'm like, but, you know, the film's going to hold up just plot-wise, right? The plot-wise and the timing and the pacing in the film is just excellent. So, you know, that's kind of what you want to strive for in kind of any kind of scary horror film. This film, I think there's, you know, pretty decent pacing build-up. I wouldn't say, I don't know if it's going to be a classic, but it definitely has a lot of fun elements like the racism, the bullying, the presidential election, these kind of subtle elements that you add in to kind of spice up the film. So yeah, I think it was overall, I think they could have done maybe a little better on maybe the kids' stories, just make it more personalized to the kids. Some of the stories were personal to kids and other stories just weren't. And so if they had played on the own kids' background, that could have been a little bit stronger, tighter knit fear factor, I think. But overall, it's a fun film. I recommend it. If you guys want to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.